for joining us on Legacy Markets. In November 2020, the Prime Minister of Belize appointed Dr. Osmond Martinez as the CEO of the Ministry of Public Service, Constitutional and Political Reform. 6 months later, the Prime Minister appointed him to several positions, including Chief Executive Officer in the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and Investment, the National Designated Authority to the Green Climate Fund, and the Executive Director to the Caribbean Development Bank. This week, Legacy Markets economic analyst Rafia Flowers leads a discussion with Dr. Osmond Martinez, the Chief Executive Officer in the Ministry of Economic Development, who has taken the time to discuss different economic areas with us. Rafia, take it away.
Thank you, Destiny. Welcome, Dr. Martinez. So, over the last couple of shows, we have been talking a lot about the economy and especially the change in our landscape since COVID-19. So since we have you on the show today, we want to dive in a little more about Plan Belize medium-term development strategy. And so we've been through the plan and it seems very promising. So what makes this plan a little different from any of the other plans we've seen from other administrations?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's quite an honor to be here. And congratulations for development, creating such a beautiful atmosphere.
Thank you, thank you.
I like the backdrop. Yeah, it's okay. Beautiful.
Thank you.
First of all, when you look at the medium-term development strategy, the first point is that it's a strategy that was developed by Belizeans for Belizeans. It's the first one in history. Normally, most of the medium-term development strategies, historically, they have been developed by consultants, whether they're from the United Nations, World Bank, the International Development Bank. And the difficult part when international consultants develop any work within any nation, not only in Belize, they also have an agenda. In this case, it's our plan. It's a plan developed by Belizeans for Belizeans. And based on that, we were able to develop a vision that we believe that is one that is well aligned with the Belizean needs. We were developed to make it basic and simple with 6 strategic points. And for the first time, the number 1 strategic point that we have on the MTDS is reduction of poverty. Mm-hmm. And based on that, now you will be able to see that historically, since 1995, when the first poverty census was done, the second one was done in 2002, the third one in 2009, and the fourth in 2018. But what we have done now is that we understand that poverty is a serious health or a serious underlying issue within our economy. Therefore, we're doing it on an annual basis. Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, if poverty is taken care of, everything else should be fine.
Okay.
The second strategic point is the increase in economic activity and economic development transformation within our country. We have seen where GDP has performed well, mm-hmm. where our macroeconomic indicators are at an unprecedented level. So when you look, for example, at debt to GDP in 2020 was at 133.5%. Now is at 63.4% as of today. No? And we are the first country in the world to achieve such a milestone where debt to GDP has reduced by more than 70% in 3 years. And I always say it's only 1.5 years. And I'll tell you why, because the first 18 months of this administration, our main focus was to look at 2 things, or 2 phases. One was to save lives, and two was to see if our economy. When you look at our economy, it was days away from collapsing, meaning days away from seeing a devaluation. It was days away from just seeing one of the worst scenarios in terms of economy activities in Belize. So the second 18 months is when we have worked now to transform our economy, whereby we needed to create a more of a friendly environment for investors. When you look, for example, at investment in Belize, through the foreign direct investment, it has increased almost 60%, especially in the construction sector and the BPOs. So the second pillar is performing well. Where we need to do more is in our third strategic point, and that is trade deficit. Mm-hmm. So since our economy has had a significant increase, we have high consumption. So, and Belize, in Belize, we 53% of what we consume is imported. So, but it's a unique situation because while imports has increased, export had decreased, our Federal Reserve at the central bank, they are at the highest level. Mm-hmm. So why? No? And that is simply because we look at trade just from, or the trade deficit just from trading of goods and commodities or commodities in general, but not on service or services. So when you look at the tourism sector, we bring in US currency. When you look at the BPOs, we bring in US currency. And any other job that is being created by an external organization or company that is paying foreign, by using foreign currency, but providing a service or exporting the services without moving from Belize. And so while there is a trade deficit in goods, we do have a surplus when it comes to trading of goods and services. And the fourth one is the protection of the environment. And historically, Belize have done well when you look at the protection of the environment. I think we are one of the leading countries in terms of natural wealth. You know? To the point that we were the first one in history to do a blue bond transaction. And the blue bond transaction did have an impact of 12% to our GDP, 12% reduction. But the multiplier effect had a 25% impact on our debt to GDP. And our blue bond model now has been replicated by Ecuador, Barbados, and the IMF recently recommended it to Pakistan to use it. So that's our fourth pillar where I think we're doing well. And at the same time, we are working on the establishment of a carbon credit legislation, which the consultation was recently completed, and now it will be tabled at the House of Representatives for approval. Now, within the carbon credits, for example, we have the green carbons, the blue carbons, and the black carbons, which it is our hope that we will be able to monetize them, hopefully by the end of this year or next year. And then pillar number 5 is citizen security. And so through citizen security, we have done a lot. So if you look at the numbers again, historically, Belize is a small country, so one crime is one too much, right? And so we have managed to flatten the curve, especially on intended homicides, and decrease the curve now to the point that last year's report shows the lowest crime rate in the history of Belize. But that is using through science and technology. So for example, through the Central American Bank, CABE, we do have a $60 million project whereby we're using now surveillance cameras that have an AI component on it. And that is a project that we are planning to expand into other phases where we can continue to use the surveillance cameras as one of the evidence to convict any crime before the court. And then the sixth point is good governance. So when you look, for example, at good governance is a two-way stream. There will not be corruption just by one person. And normally corruption does not exist between two persons within the government. Normally you have corruption where you have two parties, and that's the public and private sector. So, but a lot has been done. There is a good governance unit now within the Ministry of Public Service, and they're doing a lot of work. Now we have signed on to the UNCAC, and the implementation of UNCAC is now, we are hoping that it will show good dividends in the country, and it will be reflected on the top 5 pillars, which is to reduce poverty, increase investment, reduce our trade deficit, and help us with the protection of the environment. And as a result of that, we should see a significant reduction on citizen security or crime, to improve citizen security.
Okay. So I thank you for that explanation there on all the pillars, but I want to touch a little bit on MSMEs, because I know that Plan Belize, it speaks a lot to micro, small, and medium enterprises, and we've been talking a lot about that on our shows. What are the effects of MSMEs on our economy, since we have you in here today? So I'd like for you to elaborate on that for us.
MSMEs participation is around 75% of our total entrepreneurs, within our ecosystem. Nonetheless, they're a population that is that have always suffered because, and I'll tell you how. So, for example, access to finance is an issue for MSMEs. Access to affordable finance is a second issue. So, access and affordability, two different elements that have significant impact within the MSMEs, but also not to have clear policies on incentives and at the same time on how to protect the MSMEs, because there are very innovative ideas within the MSMEs, but if there is not copyrights or legislations that will protect them, then that is an issue. So what we have done with MSMEs is actually the first thing to solve the first problem, which is accessibility to finance and affordability, is to fix the definition of MSMEs. So can you imagine ASR, BSI being considered an MSME?
Well, it's definitely not micro. It's not small.
Absolutely, but under the international definitions of the GCF, Green Climate Fund, ASR, BSI falls within the MSMEs. And I will tell you why that is important and why it's important to understand that aspect. Because, say for example, the banks, the banking system and the design of the architectural financial designs of the banks is that there is a formula for MSMEs. And so when we work with the Caribbean Development Bank, for example, and IDB, where we get to channel funds through DFC to the MSMEs, we identify a problem whereby the funds were not moving. And so we were asking, but why, And then the MSMEs would come and say, listen, there are so many criteria to follow. And at the same time, once I have all the boxes have been checked, all the boxes have been checked, and I qualify now. I have an issue because my business will only get maybe $10,000, $20,000. And so that became an issue because we have some strong MSMEs that have a high cash flow. So the new definition now, which is the equivalent to IFC of the World Bank, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, will help us to understand that the MSMEs now can access more finance. So accessibility is there. Now the problem is affordability. Mm-hmm. So the cost of finance for an MSME is still high. It's around 7 to 9%. It's much better than what it used to be, but we need to continue to improve the affordability of finance for the MSMEs. And so affordability is an issue. Then the other parts or the other policies that are in place is, for example, the national investment policy. So when you look at the national investment policy and we look at the incentive package, now there is a $1 million that all MSMEs can access through capital investment. And these are incentives that were not there before. And third is that there is a little bit more of visibility and opportunity for them. But one of our biggest challenges in Belize is that we continue to have a high informal market within the MSMEs.
So Dr. Martinez, you had mentioned the informal market. Can you elaborate and explain to us what that really means for MSMEs especially? So
that's is a big problem for any nation, and all nations and all economies experience the participation of businesses or MSMEs participating on the informal market, and even labor force. So, for example, participate on the informal market. The consequences is that, say, for example, an MSME that is not well registered into the system, so they will have continuous pressure or constraints to access finance from any organized organization, or think about having an MSME getting sick today. So, for example, a tacos vendor, if they're not contributing to Social Security and they're sick, that means that their revenues stop, and they will have to find monies how to pay their health services that they will be receiving. So the issues are numerous, and when the MSMEs participate in the informal market, is it illegal? It's not illegal. Is it healthy for the economy? It's not healthy. Okay, and that's why I keep encouraging the Social Security Board to market the Social Security as a social program, because when the owners of these small enterprises retired, they don't have the strength to continue to work and to go there and put their business out, then they won't have a pension. Okay, so we have to think not only of today in economics, we also have to think about tomorrow.
Sustainable.
Yes, and being informal restrain or there are many constraints. There are a lot of negative activities, and many of the MSMEs don't register because they are afraid that there will be high taxes that they will have to pay. And in Belize, one of the things that we have seen is that the MSME's margin of profit is thin. So they're always concerned that they will have to use that thin margin of profit to pay taxes.
Well, we need to take a break right now, but when we come back, we have a few more areas that we would like for you to enlighten us with. We'll be right back with some more.